Okay, welcome back. Let's pick up again. We've been reading chapter 2 of Sosa's book, Knowledge and Perspective, and we made it through section 1. It took us a little while. And just remember, in section 1, what we did was we split things. Sosa had this story that knowledge is evident, true belief, and he divided evident into self-evident and non-self-evident, and then pointed out we can restrict to the case where we can just restrict our attention to non-self-evident and get everything we need. And being non-self-evident turned out to be equivalent to having this sort of pyramid-y thing that you could build. And he called this sort of pyramid a complete epistemic justification, or no, a complete epistemic explanation. Okay, and so that at the end of section 1, he proposed a new account of knowledge. So we had all of this stuff that we went through. Here's his picture of the pyramid. And then down here, we get this new definition of knowledge. Yay! S knows that P, if and only if. S, it is true that P, S believes that P, and there is one of these epistemic pyramids for S and the proposition that P. Okay, new definition of knowledge, and then immediately, Gettier. And so he spends a little while pointing out that Gettier problems still linger for this account of knowledge. And that's something you're going to get to write about in your very short essays. And he immediately proposes a solution. We can fix this problem, yay. And the solution is straightforward. These pyramids, we have to be non-defective. And what it means to be non-defective is that every single proposition that occurs anywhere in the pyramid needs to be true. Okay. And now once we make this change, according to Sosa, we actually get around layer style objections as well. Yay. And you might wonder, wait, how do we get around the layer style stuff? And it's pretty straightforward. He uses a Dretske-ish move. He says, in general, it is false that if one is justified in believing P and P entails Q, then one is justified in believing Q. I suppose this underlining should have continued. Okay. And remember, that's exactly the sort of move that Dretske wanted us to make as well, although for different, although Dretske's focus was different. Okay, great. And so between the account he gives us and our making Dretske style moves, we can get around the problems that we were worried about. And so we have an exciting new theory of knowledge on hand. And now let's move on to section 2. And the first thing that Sosa does in section 2 is say, despite the merits of the present account, I believe it can be shown to be too narrow. So immediately after convincing us that what we got on hand is a shiny, new, exciting theory of knowledge, Sosa goes on to show that there are problems with it. And all I want to do in this video is walk you through the 3 types of problems he shows. So the first thing he does, oops, sorry about that. The first thing he does is give us this example where the theory gets things wrong. He says, what if A is rationally justified in believing X given his body of data D1, whereas B is not rationally justified in believing X given his body of data to D2, where D2 includes D1, but is much more extensive as a result of A's irresponsible negligence and B's commendable thoroughness. So maybe a little more concretely, let's suppose you and I are wandering around in the world and we come across this painting that looks a whole hell of a lot like the Mona Lisa. And I glance at it and I say, that's the Mona Lisa. So the data I have is just what I get from a glance at it. And you, suspicious that the Mona Lisa would just be, laying about, do a very thorough investigation, right? You put on your art historian hat and you take out magnifying glasses and I don't know, whatever else, tools, and you investigate very carefully to see whether it's the Mona Lisa. And at the end, you just can't tell. And so you are not rationally justified in believing that it's the Mona Lisa. Maybe I am. It looks like the Mona Lisa from like the best I can tell. It's, Mona Lisa-ish. And it seems problematic to say that somehow I know and let's just suppose it turns out that it is in fact the Mona Lisa. It seems weird to say that I know it and you don't, when the only reason I know it is because I didn't bother to investigate very carefully. Okay. So what Sosa's pointing out here is that the account he's given so far would give us that sort of unintuitive result. That on the account he's given so far, me just glancing at it and saying, yeah, it's the Mona Lisa, would turn out to be knowledge. And you doing a deep dive, being really careful about it, and then being like, I'm not sure, you would fail to count as having knowledge. And that seems wrong. It seems like there's something that's gone wrong here. I shouldn't count as knowing. And the reason it feels that way is because the only reason I feel like I know is because I was irresponsible and negligent. I just didn't bother to investigate. That shouldn't count as getting me new knowledge. I shouldn't get new knowledge just by being lazy. Okay, so that's one problem. Another problem that his account has is the Mr. Magoo problem. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with Mr. Magoo, you can, of course, go Google Mr. Magoo, or I've helpfully put one Mr. Magoo video up in our Canvas page. But the picture here is that Mr. Magoo's not got great sight, not got great hearing, but maybe he's incredibly intelligent otherwise. And let's suppose that Mr. Magoo is in fact an expert on the operation of cable cars. And so Mr. Magoo does a thorough investigation of a cable car before he gets in it. He investigates it in great detail, and he determines that the cable car is safe. And so that if he gets in it, and so he determines that if I get in this cable car, I will safely arrive at my destination. But Mr. Magoo, being hard of hearing and mostly blind, doesn't recognize that there are bombs raining down all around him. It seems odd to say that where you and I getting in the cable car would say, I don't know that I'm going to make it safely there because there's all these bombs raining down all around. There's all this catastrophe happening everywhere. I sure as hell don't know that I'm going to make it there safely. As far as I know, I might get blown up. You and I would count as not knowing we're going to make it to the other end. Whereas Mr. Magoo, simply by being unaware of all those bombs, turns out to have knowledge of his safe arrival, provided he does in fact arrive safely. So if it's true that he will arrive safely, he would have knowledge. But the reason he would have knowledge isn't because he somehow knows he's not going to get hit by a bomb. It's because he's unaware of there being bombs. Again, this seems counterintuitive. It's not due to laziness in this case, but it's due to him having like inappropriate apparatus for the setting. And just having the inappropriate apparatus to investigate your surroundings shouldn't somehow get you extra knowledge. The third sort of example that Sosa considers is this newspaper example. And so the way it goes here is you've got somebody, let's suppose it's me, and I read a newspaper, and in the newspaper it says some famous person has been assassinated. I don't know. Elon Musk has been assassinated is what I read in the newspaper. And then in the next edition, the very next day, the newspaper comes out and says all of those reports of Elon Musk's assassination were lies and false. But it turns out that the second edition was in fact incorrect. Like the newspaper offices have been hijacked by, I don't know, nefarious ne'er-do-wells, and they put out these reports that the previous reports were lies, but the reports saying the reports were lies were themselves lies. So Elon Musk in this hypothetical scenario has in fact been assassinated. I believe it because I read the edition that said it, and I failed to read the next edition, the edition that retracted it. So my belief that Elon Musk has been assassinated is based on the first edition. Had I read the second edition, I would think he had not been assassinated. As it turns out, he was. So my belief is true. And it's not that I failed to investigate. I wasn't just lazy. I just had better things to do that day than read the newspaper. And it's not that my apparatus is incorrect. It's that somehow, given the type of world I live in and the way I should go about getting information, I've somehow fallen short. And so it's a little harder to say exactly what's gone wrong here, but it still seems strange to say that I alone, among all people, know that Elon Musk has been assassinated. And what makes me have that knowledge is my failure to have read the second edition of the newspaper. So that seems like it's a weird result. And so these are all problems with Sosa's account of knowledge so far. He gives us an account of knowledge, but then there are these three weird cases where, according to Sosa's account so far, we do have knowledge, but it seems that we shouldn't. And the way he proposes solving it is by adding this social aspect to knowledge. And we'll get into that in a little more detail in the next video. But immediately he points out that there's a weird feature here. If knowledge has a social aspect, then he says, what is what is known, what it takes to know as a member of one community might not count as knowing in another community. And that seems a little weird at first, and you might wonder if this is a feature of the account or a bug in the account. And Sosa claims it's a feature. Okay, and so you can imagine he has this story about a vacationer in the woods. Oops, I want to highlight, not cross out. A vacationer in the woods. So, I'm wandering around the woods, I see a bush and I think it's blueberries, and maybe I know well enough for the average vacationer that that's blueberries. But of course, the guides who are experts in the area wouldn't count me as knowing, because they know, like, for example, all of these poisonous berries that look a whole hell of a lot like blueberries. And so qua guide, I don't know that these are blueberries, but maybe qua vacationer, I do. Okay, next time in the next video, we're going to talk a little bit about what exactly this social aspect is. Okay, thanks.